call to order the special joint meeting of the governing body and the Economic Development Authority for Tuesday, November 19th, 2024, for the purpose of adopting resolutions authorizing the issuance of industrial revenue bonds to finance the costs of the construction and equipping of an entertainment venue consisting of an 8-screen movie theater, dining space, and other amenities to be located on parcel B-2 in City Center Phase 3, and finance, if and as needed, capitalized interests on the bonds, one or more reserve funds for the bonds, and costs of issuance related to the issuance of the bonds. First, the governing body will approve its agenda. Do we have a motion?
Moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Chair Bryant, does the EDA wish to approve their agenda?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. Good evening, everyone. I call to order the meeting of the Manassas Park Economic Development Authority and its joint meeting for the Manassas Park governing body on Tuesday, November 19, 2024. And we have a quorum present. Our first item is approval of the agenda. Directors, is there a motion on the floor to approve the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. The agenda is approved by the EDA.
Thank you, thank you. I believe Keith has some information for us.
Yes, so good evening, EDA board members and council members. I'm joined tonight by the same crew that you saw previously, Jimmy and Joe from our financial advisor, Davenport and Company, and TW from our bond counsel, McGuire Woods. So before I let Dean kind of talk about the resolution, since this is the first public meeting we've had on this topic in a long time, I'd like to catch residents up to kind of where we are, provide some historical context. So back in 2018, 2019, we had a comprehensive plan to address several things downtown. Those were a $27 million capital liability, this building, City Hall, the lack of parking for commercial activities, the lack of demand in terms of rooftop. If you remember, there was a Street Sense commercial study that shows that we need about 2,500 rooftops in the downtown to make commercial activities viable. And then lastly, the lack of an anchor to drive foot traffic, et cetera, to support all of the surrounding businesses. There were 4 phases to this comprehensive plan, at least in the immediate downtown. Phases 1 and 2 were the Altena and Park 178 apartments, so that partially addressed some of the rooftop demand issue. The VRE parking garage that's being built, we're projected to have that completed this coming spring. That partially addressed some of the parking situation. Also, the location of the VRE was changed, so that kind of helped a little bit with the pedestrian foot traffic, et cetera. There are a couple of other things that are still on track to address parking. We have some angle parking spaces that are in design phase right now. And then we have the surface lot that's part of phase 4 that is still on, we're still in the process of getting a permit and construct that, the developer. So we're still addressing parking. For the capital liability, especially City Hall, we were able to accomplish that through a public-private partnership with North Scott, the developer that built the residential houses you see, this building and the commercial building where the steakhouse is going to build out. And the concept for that one essentially was that the city took out a revenue bond to pay for the construction of this building, and in return, we would get the tax revenue from the new residential development, the townhomes that you're seeing around City Hall, to pay for the bond. And that's important because I want to draw a parallel to this project here in a second. The last item that the comprehensive plan was going to address is the anchor. And so, just to recap, through the private partnership, private-public partnership, we tried to address parking, we tried to address rooftop demand, the capital liability situation, and now we're looking at the anchor, the last piece of this. So in 2019, I think it was around the end of the year, October, November, when staff was recruiting for a theater, and we went, to Vegas, to Comic-Con, a bunch of different places to recruit a theater. Cinema Cafe was the first interested party. They are a local chain in Southwest Virginia. We had a signed letter of intent with them, and we were in negotiation with them, and we were going to move forward. Unfortunately, if you remember, right when end of 2019, 2020, that was when COVID was like the worst, sort of at its peak. And so there were massive disruption to supply chain, rampant inflation, and really commercial real estate took a hard hit, right? And that kind of derailed that project. So because Cinema Cafe dropped out, we were working with Norton Scott, who at the time was still part of the comprehensive plan to recruit a theater for us. So we were working with Norton Scott. They were able to go out and recruit B&B theaters to come. And in 2023, so 4 years later, I just want to emphasize how long it takes to recruit a business, especially in Anchor, right? 4 years later, B&B and Norton Scott signed a letter of intent. Now, this was a business-to-business deal, so we don't obviously see their negotiations. They have NDAs, et cetera. But somewhere in the negotiation, it kind of broke down, and in order to continue the momentum, the city sort of tried to retain B&B and picked up where Norton Scott left off. And so that's kind of where we are. Now, for the last 6 months, staff has spent a lot of time doing due diligence, and we continue to do due diligence, reviewing B&B financial, working out with our bond counsel and financial advisor to bring this item forward. B&B in the city has entered an LOI, which is why we're at this step today. And I wanted to draw a parallel to what I mentioned earlier with the City Hall. The way this is going to work is at a high level. We are taking out a revenue bond to construct the movie theater. We're going to lease that building to B&B, who will pay us rent, which is then used to pay the bond that the city takes out. So now, obviously, we're still in negotiation, but at a high level, it works very similar to how City Hall was built. We will take the bond out, build the building, and B&B will rent the building from us, and that rent money is going to pay the bond note payment until they can refinance the bond, whatever at year certain, 10, 15. Additionally, they will also operate and own the actual business of the movie theater. So we are not movie theater. We are not in the movie theater operations. B&B will own and operate it. As a reminder for staff as well, the theater will be a luxury 8-screen theater. They will have heated recliner seats, wall-to-wall curved screens, a full bar, a full-service restaurant, arcade, and bowling. And so coming back to the resolution tonight, this is the first step in a series of public meetings, a series of steps that you guys will be involved in. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to Dean to kind of talk about the actual item in front of you.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Welcome, Dean.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening. I want to just clarify one thing, and Keith did a great job of summarizing, but we aren't actually going to own this, and we're not going to be leasing it to B&B. They're actually going to buy the property. And that was the critical piece of this, because they are technically going to be the borrowers on this bond. The city is providing its moral obligation to provide any gap if they're not able to pay. So the process is basically the same. It's just that instead of B&B providing rent payments to us or at EDA to make payment on the note, they're going to actually make direct payments on the note, and then the city is going to make up any differential based upon a loan, a separate loan that the city will grant to the EDA. The EDA will then loan to B&B. There are an awful lot of additional agreements in this agreement. These two resolutions tonight are, the first one is the city asking the EDA to issue the revenue bonds. And then the second one would be the EDA saying, yes, we will do this. And we're basically authorizing staff and bond counsel and financial advisors to do what's necessary to prepare the offering. Now, I mentioned the ownership, and the reason I did that is because on December 3rd, we're going to have a public hearing on the purchase and sale agreement for the property, which will spell out all the moving parts, and including another piece that's going to be on, or another item will be on that agenda, which is an admissions tax on the individual tickets. those emissions taxes, the emissions tax would then be pledged towards any differential between what the is owed on the bonds and is that B&B is to pay. So that'll come later. And like you'll have a public hearing on both of those on December 3rd and then a vote on December 10th on those. Separately, we're also going to have agreements between the city and the EDA and B&B. We're also going to have a deed of trust on the property, which is why it's so critical that B&B owns the land, because we, the city, need to be able to record a deed of trust on that property so that if they default, then the city can go ahead and foreclose on that, and we're not stuck with this big, building sitting there in the middle of the city without anything we can do. Similarly, we're going to also put restrictions in the deed that state that it reverts back to the city if they ever stop using it as a movie theater or entertainment complex, up until as long as there's outstanding debt that the city is somehow involved in. So those are kind of a lot of the moving parts. We anticipate making an offer, the bond offering sometime in February. One of the criteria, though, is that they have to own the land. B&B has to own the land. So when you see the purchase and sale agreement in a couple of weeks, you're going to note they have a study period or an inspection period, I think it's called. They have the right to walk away at any point there. And so we certainly don't want to issue bonds before they've committed and bought the property. Okay, because we have to have some way of paying them back. So if they walk away on purchasing the property, then the whole thing falls apart. So we're going to make sure that there's a requirement that they own the property prior to us making the offer on the bonds. Bonds will probably close about 2 weeks later. And by that time, we will have or at that time, we'll record the lien against the property. So a lot of moving parts. Sorry to get too confusing. Tonight is just really the first step to get everything moving. A lot is going on behind the scenes on this, and this is just to kind of release everybody, if you will. So with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dean.
And by the way, we also have the master, the person that drafted all this is TW Bruno from McGuire Woods. That's our bond counsel. And then we have Jimmy Sanderson and Joe Mason from our financial advisors. So they can also answer questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you very much, Dean. Chair Bryant, does the EDA have any questions or comments?
Does anyone have any questions? I do have a question, just to Dean, when you mentioned deed restrictions,
Can you speak?
can you hear me?
Can you move it?
I can hear you, yes.
A little bit closer.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that better?
Oh, super.
Okay. When you talked about the deed restrictions and if there's any, outstanding debt, so way out in the future, once this building is paid for, what's the anticipation there that they can do whatever they want?
Yeah, they're going to, so the deed restriction, the right of reverter will only be as long as there is a debt owed to the city or the city is somehow related to it. They anticipate refinancing this debt around the 15, 20-year mark. They say there are theaters, they typically have to go in and redo everything to keep them fresh. At that point, they take a loan out, pay off everything, and we release all the liens. At that point, we would also release the reverter clause, probably. I mean, I'm okay with keeping it in there, but at some point, 50, 60 years down the road, that might not be a viable location for a theater anymore. And so we don't want to put a deed restriction in there that lasts in perpetuity, and courts don't necessarily like that anyway. So we'd want to go ahead and make sure that the deed restriction was removed so they could follow through with any zoning at the time. We can't really restrict future governing bodies either, and it might be seen as an artificial effort to restrict governing bodies' authority with zoning down the road. So we have to get rid of it at some point.
Thanks. I don't have any
Do
more
you have a
questions.
follow-up?
No, I don't have any follow-up questions.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
So Keith, this question is for you. And it's the same question I've asked, and I know all these things in the way. So it's the same question I've asked in closed session, and I think it's important for folks to hear. If we don't go through with this, what happens to the downtown?
So a couple of things happen if you don't go through with this, and it's not just a matter of you guys not voting for it. Let's say, B&B did the study and they walk away, right? They also have a say in during the study period. Then two things happen. One, I have to go back to the drawing board and bring back another solution to you guys because empty land does us no good. You know, when a developer owns empty land, they need to develop or else it doesn't do them any good. They have to pay taxes on it. Same thing with us. When we have empty land, we have to put something there. We're not getting the tax revenue. You know, so I have to bring probably an option back to you all. And, you know, it just starts the clock and you see how long this process has taken us. Number two, it has to be the right business, right? Like if you look at the city geographically, we don't have a lot of land left for development. You have to get the best bang for your buck. Now, there's always redevelopment. Yes, that's true. But when you redevelop, now you're talking private ownership, right? It's a little bit different game we're playing. For city-owned land, we don't have a lot left. We can't just put whatever we get there. It has to be the right thing to get us the most tax revenue. I mean, it's, you know, I hate putting it that way, but it is true. And then lastly, you know, one of the things that we have premise residents for a long time that we need an anchor. Now, it doesn't have to be a movie theater. Obviously, you know, an anchor could be a grocery store as well, but we saw that it's very saturated on Liberia with a grocery store. You know, with the Rego and Manassas closing down, with the movie industry rebounding, with B&B product, I feel very comfortable thinking that that's the better alternative in terms of an anchor than a grocery store. And so, you know, I have to go back to the drawing board and bring something back to you guys. That's going to take time. But in the meantime, you have these businesses that are starting to come in. You know, across the street, we're making a lot of progress. And I know it seems slow because they're building out, but they're coming. And, you know, some of these businesses have the understanding that there's going to be an anchor there. And so the longer we wait, is you know, we might risk having them go out of business. You know, so that's just kind of where we will be if this doesn't go through.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a follow-up?
Just, this is more for my own amusement. With the bowling alley, do we know if it will be USB certified or it'll just be a fun bowling alley?
I think it's a standard bowling alley, but I can ask. We didn't get down to the weeds that way.
I'm just wondering because I know a lot of people that bowl on leagues and it's nearby.
And some close to home, too.
Yes. Some have bowling gear in the back of their car right now.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, that's it.
Okay. Any other? Yes, ma'am.
Kind of to piggyback off what Councilmember Hampton said, in your opinion, Keith, will the theater coming here help the businesses across the street with their revenue?
Yeah, so, you know, the theater will have, so the theater, I know it's a theater, but it's really an experience. You know, I'm looking at their construction budget. You know, I mentioned the full restaurant. I mentioned the you know, luxury theater experience. They're going to have stuff inside there for kids. There's arcade. It looks like they're planning on building either a rock wall or a rope course inside the movie theater. So I think they're creating a family experience, and that's going to draw people to downtown. And, you know, when they come here, they want options for dining. You know, they may eat in the movie theater, sure, but, you know, they may want to eat at the other places. So I think it's a net positive to you know, to the downtown. They're projecting 300,000 annual visitors. That's on the low end, I think. So I think, you know, I think it's a net positive. And obviously we still have several developments that have been approved in years past that will at some point come online, and that's, you know, again, it goes back to that rooftop calculations. Once everything that has been approved thus far gets built out, that's also going to increase the demand for the services here. I mean, the owner of Park 170th, he is very motivated to sign leases with these restaurants. That's a change from before. You know, before we couldn't get people to come here, and now we're actually actively turning, you know, certain businesses away because it's saturated. So.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, go ahead.
You sent, I guess, the updated revised amount. Instead of 17.5 is going 22.5. And with that, it was the capitalization of the interest. Is that for 2 years, it says on the sheet, but I'm assuming it's probably going to be 5 years.
I'll defer to Jimmy to answer this here.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay over here?
Oh, he doesn't have a microphone. Wait, he'll bring you one.
Yeah.
Oh,
he's
he's got one right now.
There's a portable one.
Oh. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, Jimmy Sanderson with Davenport & Company, financial advisor to the city. So the resolution does a couple of things. It provides for a maximum par amount to be issued. I think we put $22.5 million in there, and so it's done for a couple of reasons. One, covers the $17.5 million of construction costs. It does cover capitalized interest, which is 2 years of capitalized interest. I believe it's through July of 26, I believe, but I'll double check that real quick.
But can you explain why, well, once you're done, if you can explain why it's 2 years though?
Sure.
If we're not making payments for 3-4 years.
So give me 1 second. Capitalized interest is funded through July of 2026. So the first interest payment is January 15, 2027. And so pretty common in a structure where you're ultimately going to be relying on the revenues of the asset that's being built to fund capitalized interest, meaning that we're not having to come out of pocket for that interest until it's due. So that allows them time for construction and for the project to come online, and then they can start making their payments on it. So we have had that conversation with B&B just actually earlier this week to make sure that fit into their time frame. The other things that we have funded, and that's almost $1.9 million of cost. And then there's the cost associated with the transaction too, which we've assumed about $500,000 of cost that we call cost of issuance. That total is just shy of $20 million, right? And so we also will add a little cushion in there. So if interest rates were to rise between now and when we do it, the capitalized interest cost would go up a little bit because the interest rate is a little bit higher. And then sometimes bonds are sold at a discount in our world. These are taxable bonds, so I doubt that, but we wanted to make sure we had a little cushion in case it was. So if bonds are sold at a discount, you may get 90 cents for every dollar you issue, so we like to add a little bit of cushion on that. So that's where we came with the 22.5.
So I guess when you get the bond finalized in February, with the locked-in interest rate, is that when we'll have the exact number?
Yes, sir. Yep.
So it could be below 22?
So the council and the authority board is authorizing a maximum principal amount of 22.5.
Okay.
We can't go over that amount. If the markets were to change and all of a sudden we needed $23 million to produce the revenues that we need, we would have to come back to this body. You're only authorizing up to $22.5 million.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and to kind of caveat on that, so from a timeline perspective, assuming that both boards, approve and we do all the legislative process, and the bond goes to market or is closed on the market in February, B&B has mentioned that it will take them about 6 months to do architectural and design. So that brings you to August 2025, and about 12 to 14 months to build. So you're looking at August, September 2026 to be completed.
Okay. Do you have a follow-up?
I have another question.
Go ahead.
Oh, we do. This, I guess, is going to go to legal. So, Dean, if you can answer this question. For the resolution, if there's the future governing body, there's no language in here that says that, I guess they're not obligated to appropriate funds to the EDA. But is it wise to not have any type of verbiage in there for the length of this lease-to-own agreement?
Okay, so it's again, it's not a lease to own, it's a revenue bonds, but it is done under the Industrial Revenue Act, which specifically it's not GO, general obligation debt, okay? It's specifically done in this way so that the city only has a moral obligation to repay it. So that's why you see in here it says subject to appropriation. So any future governing body could decide that they did not want to supplement it, or if B&B were to default and not make payment, the governing body at that time could decide they were not going to pay. Now that would have repercussions, as we described before, in the bond market, or the city's bond rating would suffer, and it would be hard to get debt at the time in the future, even for GO debt. So there is a risk, but there's no obligation to pay that other than a moral obligation.
Right, I guess what I'm trying to say is to minimize that risk, why wouldn't we have that standard in place in a resolution to obligate it?
Well, and if I, Dean, if I can.
Yeah, please do.
Jump in and answer. And so, some of that just frankly comes down to the Virginia law about issuing debt. So a general obligation pledge is a binding, we're going to find the dollars to pay this debt. And but we're not doing a general obligation pledge of the city here. It's a subject to appropriation pledge. And so there's a line that you can't go past. So you can sort of express your intent to appropriate and recommend or urge future governing bodies to appropriate, but obviously you can't commit them to do that. If you did it, that would be a general obligation pledge, and we'd have to put that language in there. And so the language in this resolution sort of goes to the line that you're allowed to go to for it to be subject to appropriation, but you can't really go farther than that without getting into binding future governing bodies.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense too, but, okay.
And the actual documents with the city's obligation, there's going to be a financing agreement that's referenced in here. That will contain a paragraph that'll have probably more along the lines of the language that you're thinking of, where it says that the city is going to direct the city manager to include it in the budget every year, and
Right.
it's going to again urge future governing bodies to recommend it. So that language is you'll see it in that agreement.
Which one?
It's called the financing agreement.
That'll be with the purchase agreement?
It'll be with the bonds, but we'll.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, once we get through tonight, then we'll start putting that stuff
Sure.
together.
Okay, that's fine. And then also, Dean, you mentioned that, or Keith, they had a study period, which is normal in each contract, but North Scott already, I thought, did a study period or prior, so can't they just not provide that information to them?
Yeah, so, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dean, so they were required to give them a study period. Whether or not they use the full amount there's a question, right? But to your point, the site is essentially prep. They're not going into there, they don't have to clear out vegetation, they don't have to level the terrain, anything of that. So I think that, and they're also very eager to get started as well. So I suspect that they will probably significantly reduce the study period, which helps for us, because if we've been waiting on this project for a long time, so.
Yeah, and I'll just add that there's nothing in the agreement that's going to require them to take the full study period. They can always move that up. Okay, and we have provided them with the studies that were done by Norton Scott. We've provided them, enough information, I think. I mean, the site was used as a parking lot in a city hall for, 23 years, 22 years, something like that. Before that, it was a factory, but it was some sort of organic type factory. So it wasn't pesticides. It was something that was supposed to be an alternative, is my understanding. So there really shouldn't be anything there. And the phase one that was done before didn't find anything there.
Right.
So I don't expect any problems. I mean, obviously the site can be built on because there was a city hall there. So borings, I don't know if they're going to have to do borings to find out what the site can do. I mean, there's a rocky subsurface around the city hall, so they may have to deal with that. But the fact that it's already been built on probably is going to mitigate a lot of the investigation they're going to have to do and studies they'd otherwise have to do.
No, I understand, that's fine. I mean, less contingencies on the contract, the better. But the follow-up to that is that if they do find something about construction related during the study period that will increase the cost, then we would have to change this resolution with the bond council?
You mean if there were construction costs or something?
If the amount goes up, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can take this one.
If it increased it beyond the 22.5, then we'd have to come back to you guys.
Yeah, if you look at, right, Dean's absolutely right from the legislative standpoint. If you look at the budget, I think I forwarded you guys the construction budget. There are contingency built in for exactly that, right? Every construction project usually have a 10% contingency. So their whole budget, I think they have about almost $1 million contingency, so.
Do you have another question, Hasib?
I think that's good for now. I'll
Okay.
give someone an opportunity.
Any comments or questions? Okay. Chair Bryant, I'd like to go back to the EDA. Do you folks have any other comments and questions? Okay. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to speak and to ask questions. Okay. Well, then I believe we are ready. The governing body will now vote on the governing body resolution. The recommended resolution is that the recommended motion is that the governing body approve and adopt a resolution requesting the Economic Development Authority of the City of Manassas Park, Virginia, to issue revenue bonds as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you. Chair Bryant, would the EDA like to discuss and vote on the EDA resolution?
Yes, Mayor. Any questions? Okay. I recommend there's the motion that the Board of Directors of the Economic Development, it's better. I recommend the motion that the Board of Directors of the Economic Development Authority approve and adopt a resolution authorizing the issuance of revenue bonds as presented. All in favor? Or is there,
So moved.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Hearing issues, the motion carries. The resolution authorizing the issuance of revenue bonds as presented is approved by the Board of Directors of the Economic Development Authority.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Chair Bryant, does the EDA wish to adjourn?
Any other issues or concerns? Okay, yes, we do. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried.
Okay. The governing body will now adjourn. Do we have a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you all very, very much.